when they went to do the surgery that day, what they told me was that they were going to look at the sentinel node because they wanted to make sure that the cancer didn't affect the lymph nodes, which would know if it went into the rest of my body and metastasized. It did go into one of the lymph nodes, the cancer, so they wound up removing 19 of the nodes. With that, my lymph node system on the right side is compromised now. There's like little things that have happened.
Is that an immune issue?
It is and it isn't. I can live my life the way I want. They say not to lift more than 10 pounds with the arm that had the lymph nodes removed for the rest of my life. I can't have blood pressure taken from that arm. No needles. There's a lot of things. I can't get sunburn. I can't get sunburn anyway. I mean, who wants to? But you can't do anything that's going to compromise the lymph node system, because what will happen is you can get something called lymphedema. Lymphedema is the fluid that...
Water retention.
Yeah, and what it can turn into something that begins with the letter C.
It's not good, whatever.
No, it's not good. It's painful. It's not good.
Now, before you, I want to ask you about not so much the process itself, but I guess so people can have some idea, God forbid, for other people who may be going through this, other women or men who are faced with cancer, and men get breast cancer
Absolutely.
too. Just how I think particularly for women, psychologically, maybe more so for some than others, it's a difficult issue, for social reasons and that sort of thing. And I think that you can, for so many reasons, I think you're such a wonderful example to people.
Well,
and you're an inspiration to people. You are for me.
Thanks, David.
And for my family, too. And I just want to add for people, make sure that you see your doctors.
Absolutely.
And you ask your doctor this thing. We're not here to give medical advice. We're here to tell a beautiful young lady's story. But if you have any doubt about any of this, see your doctor, ask your doctor, see a professional.
Absolutely. The whole process is it's devastating. It's devastating to the family. It's devastating to the people you work with. But it's amazing how you just put one foot in front of the other, and you get through it, and that it doesn't have to be a death sentence. When I go to Sloan for my treatments, I see some women that have it worse than I do, and some people that don't have it as bad as I do. I met someone this morning who her tumor was only 1 centimeter. She was only having what's called Taxol as her chemo, which I had my second round. My first round of chemo was horrendous. It's called AC and then T. It was 2 sets of chemos that I had to go through. It was a long journey.
And it just you get sick and you're exhausted and you don't want to go out and you just.
My story is a little different than a lot of others.
What's that like?
Well, what happened for me, to just step back, normally what happens is that you have your surgery, and then after the surgery you start chemo. And what happened was I wound up getting an infection, and I was hospitalized for 4 days. They put me on an antibiotic called vancomycin, which I was on for 4 days. Mm-hmm. They sent me home. They set up for me to go to chemo 2 weeks after that. 2 weeks later, the infection came back. I was back in the hospital, and they put me on the vancomycin. The vancomycin wasn't helping, so they wound up having to remove the expander, which was part of the reconstructive surgery. Once that healed,
it stretches the tissue.
It stretches the muscle, the tissue and the muscle. What they do is they put it underneath the muscle and then they stretch it. Very painful.
So this is I was telling you about a friend of mine, and this is where a lot of the pain was, because it makes room for the reconstruction, I guess.
Yeah, it's very painful. Very painful. It none of it's pretty. by far, none of it's pretty. After that, I wound up starting the chemo. I still had the infection for another week. I went back to the surgical care unit. Phenomenal. You go to an emergency room sometimes, you walk in and you're there for hours. You go to Sloan Kettering, you go into surgical care. It's all about cancer. It's all like compartmentalized. It's like they know exactly what to do. And I'm not saying one hospital over the other. I'm just talking about my experience.
Sure.
I never had such care in my life. I felt like because I had cancer, because they knew how to treat me. They knew how to treat my soul, and that was like unbelievable. So I wound up having to go back there a third time. They looked at my blood work and they saw that I needed a different type of antibiotic. They gave me that antibiotic. The infection was gone within a week. I started the chemo, and that's when, you know, it changed from focusing on the physical aspect to the next physical aspect, which was now chemotherapy. And I don't know what the letters stand for, but the first set was called AC, and the side effects for that were terrible. I was so sick. The first round of chemo, I lost 11 pounds within a week. I couldn't eat. It was horrible. All I did was I took. They have Ativan. They give you steroids, and they give you stomach nausea medications, and the nausea medications weren't helping in the beginning. It was bad, and the only thing I found relief from was taking what's called Ativan, which helped the stomach and it also helped me sleep. So I pretty much for the first 4 weeks slept through it. I slept. It was just too painful. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't handle the pain. By the time I had to go in for my third treatment, my third IV, I was crying to my mom. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to go. And she didn't know what to do or say to me. She's like, all right, we won't go. I'm like, no, that's not, you know. And she didn't mean that derogatory.
There's nothing to do. There's nothing to say. You have to go.
You have to go.
But you're going to cry that you don't want to.
Yeah.
And she loves you, and what's she going to do?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah, no, she's...
And this was once a week you were going, so 4 was a month.
Yeah, once a week. So it was for 2 months.
And that was my question. 2 months.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then after the 2 months, after that first set of chemo, I go on to this Taxol, which is another type of medication, chemo, and this chemotherapy causes muscle and bone ache. So I couldn't, physically, I just wasn't able to like move. My body was just so...
Physical pain.
Yeah, physical pain. Yeah. So 3 Advils at a clip. It was tough. And then after that was over...
And this is after the surgery?
This is after the surgery.
And did you have a lot of pain from the surgery?
Oh, yeah. For the first 2 weeks of the surgery, it was a lot of emotional pain. Physical pain is like this because you're now numb. Right. They cut all the nerve endings, so you don't feel so much.
Right.
But it was more emotional. Like even when I took a shower, I made my mom put a towel over the mirror. I wouldn't look at myself for the first 2 weeks. They have 4 drains coming out of your body that you have to empty twice a day, I think it was. And you have to measure the fluids before they could take the drains out. It was not very pretty. My mother did it. My mother emptied my drains. I couldn't do it. I was just it was horrible. It was just horrible. I just saw that I was mutilated and
I have a grandmother who died in agony because she wouldn't do the surgery.
Really?
Because that was her fear, but she chose the other way, and she chose not to do it, and she died in terrible, terrible pain.
Aww.
And she was the love of my life. And so this is an issue that's very close to my heart. I loved my grandmother so much.
Yeah.
And so for me to see that, you went through this real difficult, I can't imagine, emotional thing, this emotional horror, but you're here.
You know what, I think the hardest part was the fear of the unknown. And when you have that kind of fear, the pain almost seems more intense because you don't know what to expect. So on top of the pain, there's that terror. Now that I've went through it, would I do it again? If I had to, absolutely. It's saving my life. And I'm sorry your grandmother didn't have it was a different era, but didn't have someone to talk to.
It was in the late 70s.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think what we think of as really difficult but relatively common knowledge choices were not even spoken about back then.
Absolutely.
Whispered, maybe, that someone would do this. And to me, I understand all the we have such crazy ideas about self-image, I think, not just in America, but all over the place. And I see one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen. That's what I see. And so I have such admiration for you.
Thank you, Dave.
Really, I have such, and I can see my grandmother going, that's the girl you got to be talking to. You know.